He's a national security researcher and team lead in the Israeli high-tech industry, leading the Israel Defense and Security Forum's research department. Or has served in the Intelligence Corps Elite 8200 unit and speaks 5 languages, including French and Persian.
I admit, yeah. You should have started with that. Yeah.
Or's research focuses on Iran, Israel's security strategy vis-a-vis the Arab world, and the Palestinian front. Furthermore, he researches the European Union and the United States' security strategies. Or believes in integrating divine and earthly, and on top of his research work and high-tech career, he is a concert pianist and a composer.
Oh, yeah.
This is a good one to end with. Welcome, Or.
All right. Thank you so much, everybody. I think we can leave it there. I mean, I don't think we need to add anything on top of that. Fantastic. So good morning, everybody. Boker Tov. Great to see you. I gather you're a fantastic group of people who came from at least 8 different countries. Is that right? So we got the US, right? Canada, Australia. Wow. New Zealand. Wow. It's actually my dream to visit there, so it will happen one day. Yeah. Russia, right? South Africa, if I'm not mistaken, right? Anything I missed? I'm sorry. Japan? And I think that's it, right? Wow. Yeah. Amazing. So I'm Israeli by nationality. I grew up in Holon. That's a Tel Aviv suburb. We like to think of Tel Aviv as our suburb, but still it's a Tel Aviv suburb. And I actually moved to Jerusalem a few months ago. I gathered that I'd like this experience in my life. I think, I grew up in the center, like every good, Jewish Israeli from the Gush Dan, from the central area. So, but I did visit Jerusalem quite often, and it's mostly you get this look of, right? When people from Jerusalem just don't get how come you move to Jerusalem and not vice versa. There's the stigma about the city that people would want to move out from here because of many different reasons, places to hang out in, or employment, or whatever this is. I just don't see it this way. I mean, it's the most colorful city in the world. I just find it blasting. I mean, it was overwhelming with colorfulness and with the such diversity of people. I'll just give you an example. I live in Rehavia. It's a city, it's a neighborhood who used to be known as like the elite of Jerusalem, and today it's mostly populated by families who have always lived there, mostly religious, but also the last decade, this generation of young students who came. So I got this amazing vision of like a sight of Shabbat morning, like a Saturday morning, with all the religious families walking to synagogue, and then you got those secular couples smoking weed and listening to their in their Bluetooth earphones in their porches, or walking their dogs, or somebody walks to the synagogue, and then someone walks in his car and starts driving, and that's real diversity. Okay, that's in my opinion. I think living there and feeling the ambience of Jerusalem. Wow, I mean, walking in the old city, I'm sure you had the chance to do it. I can't explain it by words, and I think much of what I'd like to say here today depends on the inability of words to convey the message. I can speak as long as I want, but at the end of the day, hadn't you come here and experienced Israel for yourselves, I don't think you would have been able to see a lot of the things that I want to say here today. So maybe the first lesson for today is how experience shapes us, and how sort of the experience trumps words or our vocabulary. And I think when I come to Jerusalem, I can feel the power of the old city. I don't think any words can convey it. And a lot of the, I think, misunderstanding about Israel and its national security needs comes from a place where people often, and I studied abroad, I studied in Paris, in Sciences Po. I had a chance to communicate and befriend actually with people from all over the world. Not everyone as extremist as we would like to think. Not everyone comes from from a bad place. Mostly it depends on how exposed were you to other truths than the truth that you were educated to believe in. And I don't think people are as savvy and as informed about Israel as we would like them to be. And I think largely our fault, to be honest. Not entirely our fault, but for a large part, I think that as an Israeli, I can see the gap between what we as an organization believe in, and the way Israel as a country, as state authorities communicate those messages abroad. I tell you what, I don't want to get into politics straight away, but I will tell you that I don't come from a very black and white place of 0, 100. I think there is a big gray space, gray zone between black and white in terms of not having to prove your adversaries 100% wrong. I believe that even if you prove they're 51% wrong, if I'm 51% correct and not 100% correct, for me it's good enough. Okay, I don't need to cancel out someone who's talking to me. I see what you're saying, but okay, I'm a great believer in that. I'm not here to cancel out everything other people say, just to present my own opinion. And I think at the end of the day, something we owe to ourselves. I can tell you, traveling around the world, Palestinians, for example, do a fantastic job of, speaking to awareness. We call it propaganda or advocacy, but what Israel does, I think, is not good enough in terms of the potential that we have. Like, as it relates to in terms of how it relates to the potential that we have, I don't think that we are making the best out of it. We have all the silver bullets, and I don't think we're making the most out of it. And they are fantastic at taking a symbol like Shirin Abu Akleh, like a Palestinian boy, like the Gaza ruins, like the Al-Aqsa Mosque, and turning everything into a symbol. And they're lying, but they're fantastic at that. And I think we're saying Hebrew, מתפרץ לדלת פתוחה, they're bursting into an open door, because in a lot of cases, international forums like the UN and other places, they're simply speaking to a very, let's say the audience would be normally in their favor, because they are the underdog and we're conceived to be the strong side, and automatically you're already having a disadvantage here. Just a short story, because I know you're a group of people from all over the world, come from the Christian faith, and you're here in the Holy Land. I was in the Golan Heights a few months ago. Have you ever a chance to visit there? Okay, wow. Second. And I always like going back to the Golan Heights. I really have some sort of affinity to this place. I don't know if you've been to the Nimrod Fortress. There's a fortress called. Wow. Okay. Fantastic. So you all visited as a group. Wow. I'm impressed. Wow, amazing. Because it doesn't people always visit the old city and Tel Aviv and those corners of Israel. Exactly.
9 interns with us, young adults, and they've been everywhere.
Wow.
So raise your hand if you're one of the zealous.
Okay. The other ones are still young, right? I'm just. They're young. They're still young adults. Exactly. Yeah, I know, right? And so I visited the Nimrod Fortress. I admit I bought a bottle of wine on the way there. I just went at the top of the fortress with this great, great view. And I just sat there with a book and started reading and, chugging wine. I admit, what can I say? It's a great Golan Heights wine, by the way. And then this guy comes over and said, "Oh, you're from Israel." Apparently he's Indian by origin and lives in Canada today. And we had this conversation of, Israel has so much more potential, and I don't think you're advocating for yourselves properly around the world. And there was also a group of tourists there. I left it there. I went to a Druze restaurant in in Bukata. It's not very far from the kibbutz where I was staying. I was staying there, and it's always funny to me that it feels so much at home there, because they also have those instincts. Like my mom grew up in Lebanon, and whenever you're next to a plate but not eating, is as if you're not respecting the plate by not participating in the process of eating, rather than I'm just doing it gradually. So I ordered this traditional Druze meal, and I was writing in my diary and reading a book, chilling, and this guy comes over and says, "You don't like the food?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure, I like the food. I just doing gradually." No, because if you don't like it, no, I'm fine, I'm good. So where have you been today? So I went to the Nimrod Fortress and so on. You're single, right? Yeah. if you keep having so much fun like this, you'll never get married. and I said, I said, I'm aspiring to get married, but in the process, I'd like to have some fun too, we're just chilling and traveling. And that's so much like my mom and her sisters, and it feels so much related to that. And that group of people that I mentioned earlier was there. And she said, her name was Nasiba. She was telling all her story about me as a Druze woman. I'm pioneering and women empowerment and all that. Love it, great. So she said, let's unite you with a table of that other group and tell you my story as a pioneering Druze woman in society, blah, blah, great. So I sit next to them and said, we actually saw you in the fortress today, but we felt like we were intruding, so we didn't want to. So that in Israel, there's no such thing as intruding. It's not like the US, there's no personal spaces, trespassing. You're all like, why are you not married? So it's very much like that, within 2 minutes of knowing me, right? Yeah, so I think, so we had a nice conversation. I said, look, I'm not Christian, but I do appreciate, and I'm, as a musician, as Nathan said so graciously, sorry, easier for you to say. So I did grow up on concert music in terms of European Western music, playing Bach chorales and singing in an oratorio choir, requiems and masses, and reading the history and then visiting Europe in churches and museums. The Louvre Museum in Paris, where I used to live, so I visited the Louvre quite often. I saw all these symbols and traits of the Holy Family and the golden and the lamb and all. And I did feel affinity to all these things, despite not being of the Christian faith, but I do feel very much the power of sitting in a church and sort of seeing what is being, the sort of coming to terms with what this faith believes in. I'm sure you know much more than I do, but growing up on that music and growing up on those requiems and masses and churches, I studied organ for 2 years, and my professor asked me to accompany him a couple of times to Jaffa churches, where I turned pages and just was awed by all the ambience. So so I told them all about that, and we had really nice chat. And I think my point is that I think at the end of the day, experience shapes us, and if we only put a little bit of walls of objectivity between us and prejudice, between us and assumptions, I think we can all do much better. I'm speaking about myself as well. I grew up on certain basket of values, and I think I managed to nuance them gradually by visiting more and speaking more to people. And I only wish that more people around the world implemented the same principle when it comes to Israel, when it comes to understanding our side. You storm on Al-Aqsa Mosque and attack worshippers. Let's take a step back for a second. Why would we ever do it? Israeli police is not famous for wanting to clash with people. We all know that. It's getting criticized for not doing much, not doing enough against drunk drivers, against people who protest during COVID, and they still let it because in order to clash with people. So, and then the other half of the truth they're not telling you was that both Hamas and Turkey and Qatar and Jordan are paying armed militants and activists in order to entrench themselves inside the Al-Aqsa Mosque. There's videos of them with bats and stones and firecrackers shooting at police officers, shooting at Muslim worshippers themselves who only wish to come there and pray. 350 people entrench themselves inside the mosque. I'll show you videos down the line a little bit later. In order to guarantee that peace and safety is retained, they go on the mountain. They are heavily attacked by those militants, but they arrest them. There's not one injured person in all that event. They arrest them, and they lead, worship and prayer can continue during Ramadan. That's all they wanted to do. The fact that the headline says that the police storms Al-Aqsa Mosque and we attack worshippers is simply not true. And I told someone from one of the European embassies in Israel, but look, it's not easy for them, because of all the criticism on the part of some governments in Europe and in North America. It's not easy for them with that government. It's a bit extremist for them. Said it's all fine. I'm not in that playing field at all. I'm taking one step back to the facts, right? Let's go back to facts for a second. These are not worshippers. These are paid armed militants. Israeli police is attempting to restore law and order and enable Muslim worshippers to pray peacefully. We're not 100% correct all the time. We're not righteous. You can criticize us, but to say that Israeli police attacked worshippers is not true. Okay, and I always go back, one step back to why would we do that? You killed Shireen Abu Akleh, the reporter in Jenin. Why would Israeli soldiers risk their lives in going in Jenin and deliberately shoot a reporter? They meet reporters all the time, every day. Why would we do that? And before even, yeah, but it's not easy, but it's, well, we're acting in Jenin, it's a hornet's nest, it's a dangerous week. I'm not talking about that at all. We can argue about narrative all day. I'm talking about facts. Why would Israeli soldiers risk their lives, go into Jenin and shoot a reporter? Doesn't make sense to me as someone who's been to the IDF and knows what the orders say. There's zero evidence. There is actually Palestinian militants spraying automatic fire all over the place. I'm shocked there were not 100 people killed, not just one reporter. And that's what I'm talking about here. I want to convey to you my values and my principles, but one step back, let's go back to facts for a second and to numbers. And I think if we talked more like this around the world and less argue about the narrative, I think we can start in a very good place. Let's everyone be on the same page for a second, and then we can agree. Then we can debate. I want to tell you a little bit about maybe taking a whole, I'm sure you noticed that's a satellite picture of Israel in nighttime. And we can always take, big abstract Monet-style image picture and hone in on the pixels for a second. So with all the narrative and 3,000 years in King David, but you occupied, but it's Palestine, but it's Israel. At the end of the day, honing in on the pixels matters. And I think this is the way it really looks like to me. This is the old city of Jerusalem. I'm sure you've been there. This used to be a parking lot, actually. So when I was 7, 8 years old, I visited there with my school. There was a whole big bus parking lot over here. And they said, well, it's a shame, it's Jerusalem, wherever you dig, there's something to be found. And when they took out the asphalt and started digging, wow. So this is Second Temple time remains. Even before that, the Persian and Babylonian times. Our Secretary General, or my organization's Secretary General, is called Yaron Buskila. He used to be the chairman of the David Foundation. And he grew up in Golani in the IDF, so I'm from the intelligence corps. I'm a bit more disciplined than him. He just came there and started digging with no permission, and he found out a big vase with remains of bones, and it turns out to be a lamb who was cooked for dinner from 500 BC or something, and the police came the following day and they said, who burst into the side, and police officers came and said, "Start investigation." No, it's me. So it's wherever you look, there's something to be seen, as the proverb goes. And I think here in Jerusalem, you have all the answers of why we're here in the first place. Jerusalem is called Zion, right in the Bible. And I think Zionism largely stems from that premise that without Jerusalem, without Zion, there is no place for us in Israel, in my opinion. There is no justification for us in Israel. And I think the Palestinians understand that. If you listen to Abbas Zaki, he used to be the Palestinian ambassador in Lebanon, and he said something very interesting. He said that we're negotiating, right? If we manage to convince them to give up on Jerusalem, that the whole house of cards will fall apart. Because if they don't feel the affinity to Jerusalem, they will have no reason to stay here in the first place. They didn't make all those aliyah and all those efforts for Tel Aviv. Okay, they came here for that's the Archimedes point of Israel. They can be either in Tel Aviv or in Berlin or in Chicago. There's absolutely no difference. Having Jerusalem at play, this is a whole different ballgame. And I think the Palestinians understand that. I think largely that's why the international community asks Israel to relinquish, to give up on Jerusalem. there is absolutely no reason that Israel gives up on Jerusalem. And if we ever do that, I think going back to square one, the eve of the 67 war, where my dad used to visit his aunt in Jerusalem and run so that Jordanian snipers don't shoot at him from the old city walls. This used to be the reality of people sitting on their front porches and simply getting shot at by Jordanian snipers on the old city walls. But I think that's security, what I just said. If I talk about national security, and that's largely what I want to talk about today, national security, that's what my organization, Israel's Defense and Security Forum, argues, that there is technical security, right? What fence, what tank, what Iron Dome, and there is national security. And what's national about national security? And I think if you make it not international security, that's what my master's degree was in, international security, but national security would be understanding national ethos, understanding national principles, that you cannot have security without faith in the righteousness of your cause, without nationalism, without national ethos. If I walk into a US campus today and say those words, I'm sure, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, but it won't be very warmly accepted. Let's put it this way. And that's fine, that's freedom of speech, but I don't see Israeli soldiers fighting in the same level of prowess without national belief in Jerusalem, believe what we're fighting for, not how we fight, why we fight, right? Not how we fight, why we fight. And I think that relates to a large part to this. And then we have this, that's me with Palestinian children in East Jerusalem. I think it was in a Tur neighborhood. Yeah, and then I walked away and they called me like Yahud, like Jewish, and behind my back, that's fine. And that's Hebron. We hear it's a ghost town, it's an occupied city, when there's a massacre, whatever we hear. These are Palestinian children, these are Israeli visitors who just play soccer with them. This is an Israeli religious woman, you see how she's dressed. If you actually live in Israel and not theorize Israel from 3,000 miles away, you start getting it. You start getting the complexity. You start getting how people actually want to live together. And I think, it's interesting, one Spanish tourist told me once, and he's absolutely right. He said the Israeli-Palestinian thing has long been taken away from the hands of people in the region, as in the hands of international community. So it has long become a public domain. A public domain. It's an interesting thing to say, because even if the Palestinian leadership signs tomorrow on an agreement with Israel that says, an agreement that's good for both sides, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think the European Union would give its blessing if it's not exactly according to their principles. How do I know that? Because the Abraham Accords, which were a fantastic piece of peace accords, between Israel and Bahrain and the UAE, Sudan and Morocco, fantastic, 4 peace agreements within 3 months. What else do you need? The European Union official statement, right? It's a good step, but to remind you that 67 territories, Jerusalem, refugees, Palestinians. So both sides are okay with this. Why are you interfering? But at the end of the day, I don't think they'll be happy until the sort of religion of the two-state solution, the religion of the internationally agreed parameters, I don't think they will be fully pleased until we fulfill that. And at that point, I'm just telling them, and I met with the European delegates, tell them, at that point, we have nothing else to talk about because I'm trying to speak common sense to you, and you're trying to impose your recipe on me. And if the Palestinians are okay with that, and I'm okay with that, so what's your problem? And I think it largely leans on something that has long passed the rational level and is already deep, deep inside the emotional level. And with emotion, it's pretty hard to deal. Back to complexity. So I appreciate complexity. That's me speaking on TV and then giving a piano recital. I just had to crack it in. But I think that at the end of the day, if you have several dimensions to life, and I'm a big believer in that, you don't only convey messages through words like I'm doing right now, you also convey a message through music. when I play, I don't just put my fingers on the keys like a monkey. No, I actually convey a message. I tell a story. Here I tell a story as well. So I think when I started realizing that actually as a kid I didn't think about that, but then growing up I thought, hey, I'm actually having more ways to convey a message than just speaking. And I said, if that's another way, what could be other ways? And then I said, okay, how about the experience? You know, I visited Jerusalem, as I told you at the beginning of our talk. I visited Jerusalem. I can't convey through words. I can't convey verbally the feeling of walking through the streets of Jerusalem. You have to come and see for yourself. I can't convey to you how is it like brother for arms, right? When the people serve together and sort of give shoulder to shoulder and give each other support. I don't think I can convey the feeling without you recruiting to the IDF and feeling it for yourself. And I think that's really national security, what we're talking about here. Recognizing otherness. Not every solution can fit every arena. We'll talk about it. Okay. And I think at the end of the day, when I talk about national security, at the end of the day, the ideal blend, in my opinion, would be both conviction and ammunition. Okay, this is the flag parade last week, 2 weeks ago. I took this picture in Jerusalem. It's the Agron Street. Amazing scenes. I mean, I walk, I look back, I look at my front, and there's just an ocean of people celebrating Jerusalem with Israel flags. And then I open the media and I see Israeli extremists, shouting, crying out, anti-Arab statements, whatever. And you just don't see that when you're there. Just honing in from the satellite picture into ground level, I think that makes all the difference in the world. And but I am concerned, and I will tell you that much of the youth in Israel is not that savvy about all the things that I've just said. They have really sharp Zionist instincts, I think. They know why they're here, but they don't have enough ammunition. And I always tell them that you have all the conviction needed. I mean, I can't, mise en scène, how to say, I can't initiate such scenes like an art director, like a theater director. I can't do it. But when I ask them basic questions about Israeli history and they just don't know, at the age of 18, what the hell are you doing for 12 years in the education system? What do they teach them there? So they don't have enough ammunition, in my opinion. So when they tell them you're an occupier, Jerusalem is occupied, and they simply react out of instinct and not out of facts or ammunition, then I say you need to combine both. You need to have faith, but you need to know facts and numbers. And I wish more people had that in mind as well. So let's place a big question mark, if we may, on some of the assumptions that we're used to here. Start talking about who we are as an organization. I'll tell you in a minute. The overarching principles. I want to talk about Israel as I know it, Israel's unique security language, conviction, ammunition, what I just said, and the roadmap for security. I don't like to give a monologue, so just feel free to raise your hand and open it for Q&A anytime, okay? Just in the past week, let's start with national security. What happened in Israel in the past week? I don't know if you've been following the news. So anyone can guess where this is? It's not particularly good photo for those who don't know. Tomb of the Patriarch in Hebron? Okay. Right. This is a brand new elevator for people of special needs and disabilities that they just installed there. On the face of it, it sounds fantastic, right? What I'm mostly concerned about is how people around the world describe it, as Israel violates the status quo by installing an elevator, okay? And then the Hamas threatens that if you threaten the Tomb of the Patriarchs again, so that would be an excuse for another war. So I'm just saying it because it already repeated in the past in terms of the Temple Mount. And Israel violates the status quo by, you've been to the Western Wall, you saw the Mughrabi Bridge. I really am jealous of the people who are brave enough to walk on that bridge. I did it, but it's made of matches. I mean, the Jerusalem city engineer said that it's not a safe bridge to walk on and closed it. Israel violates the status quo. we want to help you to walk up to the mosque safely, to fortify the foundations and all that. So that would be, Jordan pleads to the UN, and then the US intervenes and so on. So everything becomes an excuse. And here I have a problem, because if we say it's okay to have a bridge that's about to fall, so we're good. You can't tell me you are violating the status quo or endangering the Al-Aqsa holy places because I'm fortifying the access bridge. You just can't say that. We can agree on a lot of things, but let's take a step back. What are we talking about here? We're talking about a bridge. We want to enable people to arrive safely in the Al-Aqsa compound, to Temple Mount. So this is yet another example. This is actually Amir Avivi, our CEO. That's his wife. They've been to a demonstration yesterday in front of a prison in Israel where Walid Daqqa, in 1980, he murdered an Israeli soldier, and he's now in prison. And there is an attempt to maybe release him, to give him to release him before due time. And luckily, he's gonna stay in prison. Terrible shooting attack around Judea and Samaria. I don't know if you heard. So this father of several children was driving his car. Palestinians just drive past and spree. And these are his 3- and 4-year-old kids who remained, without a father, right? They're orphans, partially, with their mom. And their mom, how can a mom explain to a 3-year-old kid that he doesn't have a father anymore for no reason? And that's probably the largest military drill in the past few years, simulating a multi-front war with the IDF. Many of my peers, I have to postpone many of my projects. No, but they do fine. I mean, while drilling, they're texting me what they think I should write in the position paper, and we're good. That's part of the Israeli agility, I think, that while you're doing a military drill, I have just 5 minutes, but talk to me. And I think that's really a big part of our strength. So these are the principles I just mentioned. I think experience trump words. No need to rewrite the past in order to write the future, okay? Even if we talk about the need to establish a Palestinian state, that's a good enough position. I'm arguing with that, but I'm not questioning your legitimacy to say it. It's fine to believe in that. I'm not agreeing to the fact that we occupied Palestine. That's a whole different ballgame, okay? We can establish a state called Palestine in the future because somebody thinks it's a good idea. That's fine. You see where I'm coming from. So I'm talking about facts, numbers, and being on the same page before going to solutions. That's fine to say we need to establish a Palestinian state and split Israel in two. It's fine. I'm not agreeing to the fact that we occupied a place called Palestine. It hadn't existed. It was both Jordan and Egypt. Show me in history a state called Palestine ever in history. Who was its prime minister? Who was its chief of general staff? Who was its president? And there's nothing there. You can decide that there is now a Palestinian people that wishes to have their own state. That's fine. But in 66, 67, just did not exist a state called Palestine. These are the facts. Now let's talk about solutions. That's my attitude, okay? Conviction and ammunition. Place question mark over assumptions. Peeling off that onion. Wait a second. I actually took the trouble of bringing an onion here. It's always good to visualize the message. So here it is. Doesn't smell that great. When we peel off the onion and we actually, beyond the veneer of conventional wisdom, Israel storms the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Israel occupies Palestinian territories. Israel performs ethnic cleansing. Israel takes over Palestinian land with settlements. That's all fine. Peel off the onion and you'll see facts, numbers, take a step back. Then we start agreeing when we're on the same page. Let's start talking. And I think we should have faith in Israel's just cause, if you agree with me. Now, the IDSF that I represent, that's our CEO, General Amir Avivi. It's founded in 2020. 3 years ago, we started with 30 generals. I joined the organization about 6 months later. I'm not a general, but I do have, I'm highly motivated, I guess. And we have 17,000 members within 3 years. We had a large convention about a month ago, earlier this month, with the Prime Minister and government ministers and MKs from the opposition and leading researchers and high-ranking generals. We had really, within 3 years, we got to the point where the prime minister comes to our convention, where 300 people fight over tickets. That was just simply amazing. We're on TikTok. We already have 90 and 100,000 views on some of our reels. We published. My research department, for example, published something called Strategic Assessment for Israel. 400 pages. We presented it to the prime minister, to the head of Mossad. I was actually at the bureau, like the office of the head of Mossad. Just a beyond metaphysical experience, I think. And chief of police and so on. So my attitude to national security, my attitude to research department is not, people usually hear research and there was always like a yawn in the room. And I think what we're trying to do is not to write for the drawer, as we say in Hebrew, not to write theoretically, but to have sort of actionable research, we call it. So actionable research on national security would be taking all of these issues I just mentioned and trying to be results-oriented, to write about the National Guard that we want to establish, to write about, Jewish settlements or towns around Judea and Samaria and their importance for national security. Okay, writing about why should we deny or strip off terrorists from their Israeli citizenship and deny them their national, deny them all the benefits, like tax benefits and all that they deserve by law. And let's find precedents from Australia, which you have the Australian National Law, where Australians, that's it, and the British Citizenship Act, and comparative research to show the MKs, the members of Knesset, we're not inventing any wheel here, as we say in Hebrew. We're not making anything up. Here are precedents from the Western democratic world for how to counter terrorism through the act of, denying people citizenship. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to shape reality through research. We go on TikTok and we go on TV, and it's always super, super hard, even harder than write a 40-page research. It's harder to have a 1-minute TikTok video explaining it. Yeah. That's even harder, okay? But it's a great challenge. So that's what we're trying to do. We talked about Israel's uniqueness. Talked about Israel that aspires to be both Jewish and democratic. In Gathering of Exiles, white supremacy. These are people coming in, making aliyah from Ethiopia, actually. With usually it's quite a complicated military operation to make them come to the right airport and so on. My grandparents came, the one part from Iraq, the other part, as I told you, from Lebanon. I'm not white supremacist. You can say a lot of things about me. I have many disadvantages. I'm not a white supremacist, okay? So you can say all you want about me, but these are not white supremacists. So when the BDS, some headed by Jewish American youth, by the way, who are telling me that Zionism is a form of white supremacy, because that's what they're instructed to believe, I guess, you can say all you want about Zionism. We can argue Israel, Palestine. We can argue about whatever you want. Zionism is not white supremacy. Now let's debate. If you look at these pictures, I think it's pretty obvious. People's army models. So here's Amir in his B uniform, we call it, Madei Bet. So when you serve in the IDF, you serve in the reserve service your whole life, or until the age of 45, or until people continue to the age of 70 and 80 if they really want, and they're high-ranking officers and they have high motivation, highly motivated. That's his wife, so she volunteers for the National Rescue Service, like the ambulance service. So that's a part of our lives. We take off our civil clothes and we put on our uniform and we go to reserve service. That's part of Israeli being. I think without understanding that, I think the knowledge of Israel would be limited. I think knowing Israel through articles and the media would be one thing, but actually to put on your uniform and go out for a week of, like, my social media responsible. She's now having a 1-month reserve service. I just talked to her yesterday. She couldn't be happier. I have nothing to do but to think, and no pressure, so it's pretty great. Those are the pioneers, land redemption and pioneering. So that's a root part of Zionism, right? People first came here 100 years ago, like the new wave of people, I should say. So these were people who redeemed the land and purchased land and so on. And that's the new form. You see the Israel flag here. That's an Arab neighborhood in Jerusalem. People refer to it as East Jerusalem, but that's an Arab neighborhood in Jerusalem. And this family purchased the whole building, a whole house, with money. Palestinian Authority, by the way, has a law that prohibits people from selling houses to Jews. That's Nuremberg laws, okay? For some reason, nobody talks about it. Exactly nobody talks about it because there is no expectation from the underdog to do anything. But there is a law in the Palestinian Authority that prohibits you from selling a house to Jewish people. And I know of cases of people who were arrested for that, who were heavily tried, some even executed, or some beat off in prison until they died. So that's Palestinian Authority. Okay, I'm not talking about the Palestinians, a few millions of them, many good people, but I'm talking about the leadership that is torturing people in prison for selling a house to Jews. If that happened in the U.S., please.
And that's in all of East Jerusalem?
That's a specific house in East Jerusalem.
Right, but I mean that they cannot sell a house to a Jew in East Jerusalem.
In Palestinian-controlled territories.
Palestinian.
In Hebron, for example, it happened a couple of times. East Jerusalem is not under Palestinian Authority rule, but they consider it to be as such. So they do arrest those people even though they have no jurisdiction there. In Hebron, it's partly Jewish, partly Arab. Happens quite often. They can also send land to Jewish people, not just houses. And that also leads to, so they do it through mediators, like the third parties, Arabs who wish to sell their house because that's what they wish to do. What can we say? They're offered a good price, and I don't think that it should be illegal under punishment of torture in prison to sell a house to a Jewish person. Whatever you think about it. And I just imagine the outrage if that happened in the UK or in the US of somebody imprisoned for selling a house to a Jewish person. And I think that's really the point. National ethos, that's yours truly, in the Golan Heights, actually one of the old synagogues there, from the 1st century AD, actually, before a large earthquake demolished many of the synagogues. There were over 30 synagogues in the Golan Heights before that earthquake. If you can see, that's a synagogue, actually, and here's a menorah, right? Many Jewish symbols here and a menorah. So the sea remains. It was actually used both with AI technology and modern technology and traditional archaeology to excavate all that and to rebuild that synagogue stone after stone. I consider the link of fast tracking the process. It was amazing. So to see that, the remains from like 2,000-year-old remains, so that really makes you feel Jewish heritage, right? And that's, I think, combining both the book and the sword, as we call it, Safa v'Saifa, as we say in Aramaic, combining both knowledge and books and the ability to fight. I think Israel is known to be, if you walk around Tel Aviv and you see all the people who are, working out, I think it's, to a large part, it's on the instinct of, being aware there's something you should defend yourself against, I guess, or just looking good on Instagram. But still, I think it's a big part of Israeli experience to have this awareness, okay? All right, before I move on to threats and opportunities to analyze the Middle East map and the threats around us and within us. Any questions, please?
I got a thing.
Please.
I can't see that anyone would even conceive of giving away any portion of Israel when you don't even have all the land that God promised to you now. You don't have any parts in Jordan and all, and the land that was given away in Gaza didn't work out for you, and because they want everything, they want it all. So, and God promised you all of it, and anything you do will not settle the solution, will not cause a solution, and I just don't think that God blesses those who would give away any part of this land.
Thank you. No, I agree. Yeah, please. Okay, but feel free to jump in and please, yeah.
Well, you might get to it later, but no one has come up with a solution for this Palestinian thing. And would it be a good idea to, if Palestinian people want to cooperate and live in peace with the Jewish community here, that's great. But if they don't, then I think they should leave. They should be put out.
Mhm.
That's my solution. Nobody else has got one.
I'll tell you what. I think that I don't see anyone leaving anytime soon. I'll tell you honestly. I mean, Israel is very good at evacuating Jews from their homes around Judea and Samaria, less good at evacuating Palestinians, despite the conventional wisdom. I think at the end of the day, we need to think common sense. Okay. I mentioned before that we don't need to rewrite the past, but to write the future. Okay. If you want a Palestinian state, that's fine. I disagree with that. I think it's dangerous for Israel's security. We shouldn't establish a Palestinian state in Judea and Samaria. You're noticing I'm not using the West Bank with Judea and Samaria. It's an anti-Israeli idiom, by the way, like an anti-Israeli thing to say West Bank, the West Bank of the Jordan River, as opposed to the East Bank, which is the Kingdom of Jordan. I just don't see it this way. So around Judea and Samaria, I don't see a Palestinian state established anytime soon. I do think that not out of making up for the sins of the past that we occupied Palestine, so-called, but I think the whole of land of Israel is ours. But I do think that there's 1.8 million Palestinians there. I don't want to give them Israeli citizenship. And now let's talk about solutions. Okay, Israel, my approach and my organization's approach is that everything is ours. Here are our security needs. And now let's talk about common sense solutions. Okay, I don't want to annex Ramallah or Jenin or Nablus. I just don't see it happening anytime soon. Many different solutions, including autonomies, city-states. We're about to publish a research. I can very happily send it to you for models around the world, for special sovereignty. Let's get to that in a second, okay? But I do want to get to that. Around Israel, what we have. Iran. Does anyone know about the Iranian nuclear program, at what stage it's at the moment?
5 minutes till midnight.
Full stop. That's true. We have not me saying that the IAEA and the Israeli defense minister who say that Iran has reached a point of zero breakout time, meaning that the Iranian regime, an Iranian regime that has openly calls for Israel's destruction, that's just the way it is a heartbeat away from getting 5 nuclear bombs. Okay, enough fissile material for 5 nuclear bombs, and it still needs to have the technology to put it on a missile and so on. But that's an impasse. I mean, Israel cannot allow such thing to happen in the Middle East. To have a nuclear power in the shape of Iran that is already propagating terrorism around the Middle East without nuclear weapon. So imagine what they would do with nuclear weapon, funding Assad, Hamas, Hezbollah, and all those militias around the Middle East with nuclear weapon. I think that would be an unstoppable regime. If you remember the Gulf War in 1991, I was still in process. I was here. Had they be able to attack Saddam Hussein? Had he had nuclear weapons at the time? I don't think so. Israel bombed 10 years earlier. Israel bombed the Osirak nuclear facility in Iraq, where Saddam Hussein aspired to develop nuclear weapons. I don't think the U.S. would have been able to invade to a nuclear state, to a nuclear country. So that's the challenge we have with Iran. I think everywhere we look, we see Iran's fingerprints. And my problem is that Western governments, those who come from decision-making level, just don't see it this way. We saw the best manifestation of that during the JCPOA, what they call the Iran nuclear deal, 2015, where they literally gave Iran a blank check to develop nuclear weapons 15 years from the date of signing. Blank check. Only 8-year-long restrictions on purchasing arms. Lo and behold, in the Middle East, 8 years pass, and we're long past that date, and Iran is already purchasing, under full international legitimacy, arms from whoever it wants. It had no restrictions in terms of inspections. You cannot inspect anywhere, anytime. Iran told them, they agreed with Iran. It's not the Iranian regime's fault. It's the people who signed the agreement with them's fault. That you cannot visit anywhere, anytime. You need to give a 2-week notice. We can only supervise certain sites. So it's fantastic. Now it's a fantastic deal. I mean, you have, a simulation model or a facility in Iraq or in Natanz or in Qom, and you can only visit, the ground floor and the first floor, but you can't visit 300 other sites or the second and third and fourth floor. That you can't do. I just don't see that as a serious agreement. It's not an agreement that stops Iran from acquiring a nuclear weapon that we all agree it shouldn't do. It paves Iran's way to the bomb. With cash provided by the trade agreement that would open up a few short months later, and we saw the regime do it back in the day. So today I just talked to one of my friends who made Aliyah from Iran. He's an Iran researcher in Israel, quite a hardcore guy, but he's talking about the protests there. He doesn't believe that they represent most of the Iranian people, and what he claims is that the women who wave off their hijab represent a thin layer of Iranian society, of elitists from the northern neighborhoods of Tehran and Esfahan. And most of the protesters, he says, actually want Iran's economy to do better. And they don't want the protest against the unemployment and the inflation is skyrocketing through the roof. What he says is that most of these protests wouldn't be without if tomorrow morning Iran would have a booming economy, we won't see any protests, according to him. I do think there is a large part of the Iranian population that doesn't like the regime, but at least according to him, that would be representing still a minority. Okay, if we saw tomorrow morning 1 million people marching in the streets of Tehran, waving their hijabs and say "free us from the regime," it will be still a minority in a country with 90 million people. Okay, many different causes for many different protests, the economy, minorities like Azeris and Tajikis who want to set free from the Persian regime in Tehran, all sorts of reasons. But Iran is a threat. You got the Middle East I mentioned. I won't elaborate too much. Arab countries, Abraham Accords, great potential for peace with Saudi Arabia. I'm dying to go to Riyadh, so if you can somehow, if you have any contacts in the White House, just because that would be fantastic actually. You know what my dream is actually? To visit Oman. I'd love to. Has anyone been to Oman? The pictures look fabulous. I mean, wow. It looks like on a different planet. Fantastic. It also has the largest opera house in the Middle East, by the way. Yeah, in Muscat. So we talked about Iran. We talked about the Palestinians. Let's just try to have the structure. So the Palestinians are not, you can't talk about them as a uniform. You got an extremely diverse society with Hebron being much more conservative and Ramallah much more liberal. And you got Gaza that's controlled by Hamas. At the end of the day, you got a society that's fragmented and made of tribes, what we call Hamulot, right? The Hamula, the family clan. You got the Jabari, and you got the Zbeidi, and you got the Ashtaya, and you got many different families and clans around Judea and Samaria. And Gaza. What's interesting is that many Israeli Arabs consider themselves as Palestinians. Now that's where it becomes complicated. I think, and I know Israeli Arabs, I work out with them at the gym, I meet them in my workplace. I see Israeli Arabs all the time. I don't think they're all evil, I don't think they're all extremists at all. But we have a problem because many of them, and we're talking about surveys that we did in the IDSF, it's fully available on the website, go to idsf.org.il, and you'll see the surveys. 75% of respondents say that Arab respondents say that the Jewish people has no right to have a country, like a Jewish country in the land of Israel, in any border. Green Line, Judea and Samaria, Jerusalem, Tel Aviv, Haifa, anywhere. Doesn't have neither the legal nor historic nor religious right to have their own Jewish country in the land of Israel. Now that's a problem. We did that. We polled 1 year later. We found that 69% believe it. So So the data is real, even if it's 65 or 80, doesn't matter. The data is real. So we have, interestingly, 66% of them say that Israel is an apartheid state. They enjoy full civil rights in Israel. They can work wherever they want. They can live wherever they want. But still, they believe that Israel is an apartheid state. Interestingly enough, why am I telling you this? Because most of them would not live under Palestinian sovereignty. So I don't have an explanation for that. So most of you think that you wouldn't live in a Jewish state. You don't think Jews have the right for their own country, and you think you are citizens, Israeli citizens. You live in an apartheid state. But at the same time, if you al-Fahim or Bak al-Gharbiya or Taibeh or any of the Arab cities in Israel would be transferred to Palestinian leadership, they would even go out to the street and protest. Most of the respondents said that they wouldn't give up their Israeli citizenship for a Palestinian one. So I'm confused.
We do that in America.
What's that?
We have people in America all the time that dog the police, that dog the whoever's in power politically.
Yeah.
And then they say, well, they're going to leave the country, and they never do.
Yeah.
It's like, look, if you don't like it, go. But they never leave.
Have they abolished the police yet in Minneapolis, or is it still under process?
They've changed their mind on the police.
Okay, I see.
They've actually brought them back, and they can't hire them. It's the same way here.
Yeah, it's a whole different discussion. Okay, so that's complicated. Okay, it's not just Israelis here and Palestinians there. We got Israel that's comprised of 2 million Arab citizens, many of whom see themselves as Palestinians. Not all of them, but many. It doesn't mean that they should be transferred. Doesn't mean that should be evacuated, but it means that we have a problem that we need to work on. What it also means is that if we go back to the 67 borders, it wouldn't resolve anything because it would still leave us with 2 million people, many of whom don't like the idea of Israel. In May 2021, we had the worst pogroms. I have no other words to describe it. The worst pogroms and I would say heavy protests, but that would be like riots on the part of Arab citizens of Lod, of Acre, of Jaffa, of Jerusalem against their Jewish neighbors. They're not occupied Palestinians, they're Israeli citizens, and they turned against their neighbors. How is evacuating Shiloh, Bet El, Jerusalem, Hebron would help any of that? So we have a problem here. We need to acknowledge it. What is the solution? We can talk about it all day, but let's be on the same page first, right? That's my view. And of course, we have the delegitimization. It's actually an issue that's much more relevant to you, I think, because living in your own countries, you see how Israel is portrayed in many cases, not all of them. This is not criticism, okay? That's incitement. This is not criticism, that's incitement. You see actually the US and Israel on the same map here. Can you see them? So I think, first of all, there's a whole bunch of lies going around. These are all the pictures of kids murdered by Israel in Gaza. Then 2 of the kids turned out to be militants from Hamas, and then another one. Long story short, there's a whole propaganda campaign against Israel that is having a pretty positive response from, bursting into an open door. The audience is usually pretty favorable in the UN. Some media outlets, not all of them, and people who make a living from lying to people about Israel for all sorts of reasons. It's not Israel, it's Palestine. This is and this always be Palestine. This is actually, and that's what I want you to take from this talk. This is from a Palestinian textbook. People study it at 4th grade. So this is the map of Palestine, according to them.
No Israel.
Not Israel. No, there's no Israel. It's not like Palestine here and Israel here. They always tell us that the problem is 67. And then you have this map showing Tel El Rabi', Tel Aviv. You got Hadera, you got Haifa, you got Acre, you got Beersheba, you got the Negev. This is all ours. All of it is Palestine. Now, I am not going to be that, pretentious Israeli telling them that what you believe is automatically wrong. I believe them that they believe it. Okay, and that's what I always say in pre-military programs. In those teenagers who are at 18 go to this 1 year program of, I don't know if you know the mechinot, the 1 year program after high school where they have a 1 year of reflection and sort of talks about meanings and all that. And I come to lecture there, and we all do. So look, I'm not expecting the Palestinians to forget Jerusalem. Okay, we always say in weddings, should I forget Jerusalem? You know, my tongue will stick to the back of my mouth. I'm not expecting them to forget Jerusalem. I believe that they have strong faith in Al-Aqsa. People who go out to the street and protest in such a manner are not, doing it out of, I believe they're largely brainwashed, but I don't think they're lying to themselves. I think they truly believe it. I think they're wrong, but I'm not taking it away from them. I think they truly believe that Palestine was occupied by the Jews. I believe that they believe that. The problem is that they are willing, in the name of that belief, to go out and murder Israelis. And that's where I have a problem. Okay? I think they're wrong. I think there's always been Jewish presence in the land of Israel. There's been a Jewish kingdom and the Hashmonites and the kingdom of Israel and the kingdom of Judea. And there's always been empires, the Ottomans, the British, the Babylonians. There have never been Palestine. That's what I believe. But I'm not taking it away from them. They have the right to believe it. Okay? I'm not of those Israelis who would say, you're all lying, you're all anti-Semites, there's never been Palestine. I believe them. The problem is that they're lying to themselves. And the problem is that they're aspiring, in the name of that belief, to murder Israelis and to go around the world and tell them how we occupy Palestine and do ethnic cleansing, and we have a siege on Gaza, and we evacuate Palestinian towns, and we butcher Palestinian kids, and we storm worshippers in the Al-Aqsa Mosque, and we do all of these terrible things, and yet they actually have the upper hand wherever it comes in here, right? And I'll show you in a minute. With all the talk about settlements, they actually build more in Judea and Samaria. They construct more. With all the talk about freedom of religion, I have restrictions going on Temple Mount, and they don't. Okay? I can only visit Temple Mount for 2 hours in the morning and 1 hour in the afternoon, and that's in a good day. Not in the 10 days of Ramadan where I'm not, the last day, 10 days of Ramadan, where I'm not allowed to go there. So I think they're much better off than me, if I may say so. But I still believe them. I don't think I can buy them off. Okay, this sort of Western idea of economic investments would make them forget their nationality. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think the Israeli attitude of joint industrial zones will make them forget Jerusalem. It's not going to happen. But we do need to be more powerful and entrench Israel's national security to prevent them from making true of that dream. That's what I'm saying. Okay, I believe all of it is the land of Israel. But if they want to control Ramallah or Jenin, that's fine for me, okay? Because I don't think Israel can survive with a Palestinian state here. I just don't think it's going to happen. But I'm not questioning their belief. They have the right to believe whatever they want. I'm not questioning there is a Palestinian people. There is a Palestinian people. Today, I don't think we occupied such a Palestine in the past. But today, they formed to be a group of people that calls themselves a people. I respect that. It doesn't mean that we came here as European colonialists and colonized Palestine. It's two different things, okay? So looking back at the past and rewriting it as opposed to looking forward to the future and writing it, it's two different things. All right, that's what I believe. And I think that's interesting, by the way. Israel in the bucket list of, in the grocery store list of things we should hate in life. Yeah. We have the questionable dignity of being on that high-class list. Israel forming apartheid. I just mentioned May 2021 with all the riots. In May 2021, they came out to the streets that demonstrated in Sheikh Jarrah. Their riots were met with excessive and deadly force by Israeli authorities, with thousands injured, arrested, and detained. I'm sorry, that's just lies. Okay? There should have been thousands of injured and arrested and detained because they rioted in Israeli cities, in Lod and in Ramle and in Jaffa, and burned down Jewish neighborhoods. There should have been thousands of people injured and detained, but there weren't. Okay? So looking at the 11 days of the defensive shield operation back in 2020, May 2021, and describing it as Israeli police crushing Palestinian protesters, it's just not true. I'm not saying that I don't have the right to protest. I don't have the right to burn down cars and apartments and lynch people on the street, including 3 Jews who were murdered on the streets because they were lynched to death. That's what I'm saying. So amnesty in that regard, I'm really sorry. These are just lies, okay? And those lies have really attentive ears on the part of some around the world. The UN that endorses these reports, the International Criminal Court that endorses these reports, and interestingly enough, I can send it to you. I went over the reports. It was a tough read. I went over Human Rights Watch. I went over B'Tselem, an Israeli NGO. They're all writing the same words. I even, copied paragraphs and checked and I compared reports, and these are the same words. So somebody is pulling the puppet show here, right? This is just not what happened in May 2021. We can argue whether the police response was good or not. We can argue whether they are occupied or not, but this is just not what happened. Okay? This is what happened. Okay? Now, that's what I'm calling tunnel vision. Israel is an occupying force. It's an apartheid state. It's crushing Palestinian protesters, ethnic cleansing settlements, blah, 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 blah. That's the conclusion. Now let's backfill it with evidence. That's their approach. Okay? And I just don't accept that. Okay? I don't think it's fair to you that they are telling you all of these things without enabling you to make up your own opinion. Okay? If you open Reuters and BBC, you see how the IDF killed Palestinians in Jenin. Well, they're not telling you that these Palestinians were militants who were plotting a terror attack to murder Israelis. You can't leave all of these facts aside and focus on the narrative. I just don't believe in that. Okay? So before we finish and open it up to questions, let's go very, very quickly over 7 mythbusters. Okay? 7 days of the week, like in the book of Genesis. Well, I think we went over that. Mythbuster number 1, it's all about 67. I think we proved it's fake. Okay? We have, oops, okay. So I don't have internet access here. That's a shame. Okay, but if you listen to people from Hamas, Fatah, and yeah, please.
I'm sorry, you can connect to the Wi-Fi just guess.
Yeah?
Guess Wi-Fi and no flash.
Otherwise, we're hearing from Palestinian Media Watch. So
Yeah, oh, really? Wow, Morris Hirsch?
yeah, no, it's more Marcus.
Idon Marcus, fantastic. Okay,
We'll be hearing about that next week.
amazing. So I don't want to go too long. But it's going to tell you all about it. So by the way, you should go both to our website, idsf.org.il. You'll see the address in a minute. You should go to Palestinian Media Watch. MEMRI, MEMRI, fantastic sources of information. They'll show you all of these preachers and videos from the media that show you people saying what they really think and not what we want them to say. Let's just let this girl talk for a second. Okay, that's in Ramallah just a few months ago. Don't have audio though. Where's it come from? From there? Can you increase the volume? If there's any. Nah, yeah, I can't. Oh, okay. Please. Nice idea. Okay. Okay, so she's really good, right? She's fantastic. And I believe her. The olive trees, the thyme, I'm from the entirety of Palestine, from Jaffa, from Haifa. I believe her. I don't think she's lying. I don't think she's correct. But that's not about freeing Ramallah and Jenin and Hebron. It's not what we're talking about here. So one side says, let's resolve the conflict by evacuating 500,000 Jews from Judea and Samaria, basically the Nuremberg laws, right, of Judenrein territories, and it will all be fantastic. And the other side says, I remember the Nakba of 48. So there's a lack of correlation here. There's a disconnect here between what they want, and they say it loud and clear, and what we think is a solution. By the way, in the same year of the Nakba, so-called, 800,000 Palestinians fleeing from the land of Israel during the War of Independence. There were 800,000, including my ancestors, Jews who fled from Arab countries. There were 15 million people, refugees between India and Pakistan. There were 10 million Germans, refugees from Eastern Europe. So that was a decade of refugees. This is not a unique case in any way. What's unique is the way the UN treats it, with an agency called UNRWA, that has its own definition of refugees for Palestinians and another definition of refugees for the rest of the world. So you got 65 million refugees around the world, treated by the UN High Officers, High Commissioner for Refugees, and you got UNRWA that treats Palestinian refugees. Why? Interesting question. Worth asking the UN delegate nearest to your home. And I think at the end of the day, it's interesting because there were exchanges of refugees. I can show you pictures of Jews being ethnically cleansed from the old city of Jerusalem. There was a Jewish quarter in Jerusalem in 48. And Jordanian forces evacuated them by force, okay, while injuring and killing people. The Palmach asked for, the Jewish brigades asked for a ceasefire so they could evacuate Jewish people from the Jewish quarter of the old city of Jerusalem. So none of that ever happened. 230 synagogues demolished by the Jordanians in the old city of Jerusalem and around Jerusalem. None of that ever happened, but there was a Nakba. Ask the UN why it never talks about this Nakba, not only the other Nakba, right? Myth number 2, I'm gonna run here. Gaza is under siege. Terrible. You got the whole access by sea blocked by Israel. You got the whole border blocked by Israel. No in, no out. Terrible. One small thing. There were 116,000 exits from Gaza in one quarter. Documented by the UN. It's not me saying it, it's the UN says it. So there's a mismatch here. 1 second. Is it under siege and blockade, or is it not? Again, the reality is complicated. Israel is implementing naval blockade on Gaza because we had several cases of Iranian ships, cargo full of Iranian weapon and rockets designated to murder Israelis. So we don't want that to happen. But you got 20,000, now it's 25,000 Gazan workers coming in and out from Gaza every day. 2 weeks ago we had an operation, you heard about that, right? Between us and Palestinian Islamic Jihad in Gaza. One of the people who were killed in Israel for rockets, you're nodding because you know it, a Palestinian worker from Gaza was hit by a rocket by PIJ, Palestinian Islamic Jihad. They murder their own people. You got kids killed in Gaza by mislaunched rockets, launched from here and falling here, inside Gaza, killing children. Okay? So these are the facts. Now let's take one step further and talk about solutions. But these are the facts. Also, there's a little thing called border with Egypt. We have no control over it, right? There is no blockade on Gaza. They can go in and out of Egypt should Egypt decide so. Okay? That's a small detail. Gaza is the most dense place in the world. Wrong. Gaza is dense, but it's not the densest place in the world.